Today we have, she doesn't go by doctor, but she is a real doctor, Dr. NabaAllergies. And the funny thing is, it is really a small world. We met at a tafsir class like a couple years ago, and then after that I think we just went our ways, or at least I stopped going. And then we met again at one of the organizations she's affiliated with, the American Muslim Health Professionals. Amazing organization, and maybe she'll speak to that for a bit too. But Naba is board certified allergist, immunologist, and a pediatrician. She's also editor-in-chief for the American Muslim Health Professionals blog. Her passion for humanitarian and outreach work, particularly related to disadvantaged communities and international health, has led her to work in Guatemala, treating orphans. She's instructed gifted teenagers in Israel and Palestine on cardiovascular physiology through interfaith programs. She has also led a disaster relief team in Haiti. She's also organized several free clinics, fairs domestically, and serves as Physicians for Human Rights Asylum Network provider. Maybe she can expand on that a little bit to help us understand. She was honored by the U.S. Department of Justice with the U.S. Young American Medal for service for her humanitarian efforts. So alhamdulillah, we've got lots of talent going on here. Her educational background includes a BA from Wellesley College, and her MD with distinction in research from SUNY at Stony Brook School of Medicine, and she completed her residency in pediatrics at Hasbro Children's Hospital of Brown University, and her fellowship training in adult and pediatric allergy and immunology at the North Shore Long Island Jewish Health System. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. So as Prana said, I am NabaAllergies, and I'm a practicing allergist immunologist in the area. She mentioned a lot about me. I'm originally from New York, the Northeast. I did most of my training, if not all of my training, in New York and Providence, Rhode Island. And I've been in the community as a practicing allergist immunologist for the past 4 years. So as she mentioned, I'm board certified in allergy immunology, but also in general pediatrics. And I've received the professional designations for the national organizations related to those. And I'm really honored and excited to be here. So I thought I'd start out by actually making it a little interactive. I kind of wanted to see who's in the audience. So if you have allergies, seasonal allergies, let's start with seasonal allergies yourself. Do you mind standing up? Okay, just remain standing, okay? If you have food allergies, stand up. If you have a family member or know someone that has seasonal allergies, stand up. And if you have a family member or know someone with food allergies, stand up. All right, so that is, you guys can stand. Okay, so that's most of the room, right? So the reason I'm really excited to talk about this topic, it's a topic obviously that I'm pretty passionate about, is because, and particularly in the Masjid area, is because this topic I think is one that is important for all of us to know about. Not just people, not just those of you who have allergies or know people that have allergies, but also because when we talk about allergies, we talk about being conscious of the things that we're sensitive to, right? Conscious of the things that our body is sensitive to. And that's really what health is, and that's what we're taught in our faith. Not only being conscious of the things that our body is sensitive to, but also the things that are in our environment and the things that we're exposed to in our environment. And that's something that obviously in Islam we're taught to do, being conscious and mindful of the things that we're exposed to. Okay, so this is just a slide about what I'm going to be talking about, a brief overview. I'm going to be talking about the definition of allergies, why people get allergies, who has allergies, how do you diagnose allergies, and then I know the topic was mostly sinuses and environmental allergies. We're going to definitely go into a lot about that, but also I get a lot of questions about food allergies these days, so I thought we'd kind of just cover a little bit about that since a lot of people, know people or are curious about food allergies. Okay, so what is an allergy? So an allergy is basically an abnormal response, or what we call a hypersensitivity, of our immune system by substances that are normally considered harmless. So that's why, pollen or food that should really be harmless can be a sensitizing agent to some people. These are normally harmless agents that for some people, they have a hyperactive response or a hypersensitive response, and that's what an allergy is. So in terms of, this is like further explanation of what happens in your body when you have an allergy. So basically, on the left-hand side, basically are all different types of things that people could be allergic to. It's a sampling, there's actually many more things that you could be allergic to. And you can be sensitized in many different ways, or you can be exposed in many different ways. You can be exposed by, through your skin, you can be exposed through someone actually injecting something into you at a hospital or a physician's office. You can obviously ingest something, or you can inhale something. And in terms of environmental allergens, mostly we're going to be focusing on things that were inhaled, that you can be sensitive to by inhalation. So that's like pollen, dust, mold, pet dander, things like that. But also, obviously, ingestion, food, injection. The other thing with injection would be like bees or venom. So when you are exposed to something that you are sensitive to or have an allergy to, what happens is the first time that you're exposed to it, you generally don't get a reaction. That's what's called a sensitizing situation. So basically what happens, and the example on the right is has ragweed as an example, but there's these cells in our body that are part of our immune system that the allergen, what we call an allergen, in this case ragweed, comes across this cell type, and this cell type produces what we call antibodies to that particular allergen. So in this case, it makes antibodies, or IgE, to this ragweed pollen. And so these particular antibodies attach themselves to cells called mast cells, and they just remain kind of dormant in your body for a while. These mast cells are actually your allergy cells. So the next time that you get exposed to this, that's when the allergic reaction actually happens. So these mast cells now have these antibodies that are sensitive to that particular allergen. And what they're going to do is that mast cell is going to all of a sudden release all of these mediators that it had in its cell. And those mediators are the things that actually produce the reaction that cause the allergic reaction. So the most common one that you've probably heard about is histamine. That tends to cause a lot of the reactions. Okay, so why do some people get allergies and some people don't, right? Most of you guys stood up, but some people, sat down, and so some people don't have allergies and some people do. Why is that? So there's many different theories about why that could be the case. The reason that this field is actually so interesting is because we don't know 100% why that's the case. We know that there's, kind of, part of it is genetics and part of it is your environment, but how much each part contributes, we're not sure. And in terms of the environmental part of it, we're still doing a lot of research, and every year coming out with more research to support one theory or another. I would say the most common theory, or the one that has the most evidence behind it, is called the hygiene hypothesis. And that basically is a hypothesis that as time has progressed, we have become a more hygienic environment. So we have, it says here basically our westernized lifestyle is one where we're using antibacterial soaps, we're very into cleanliness, kids don't grow up on farms anymore. We're very particular about cleanliness in our environment. We also use antibiotics very frequently, especially in the westernized world, and sometimes very early as well. We have vaccines that protect us from certain infections, and we get sensitized to allergens. Now, why would that still cause allergies? And the theory is that when you have a hygienic environment, you're not exposed to other types of things that stimulate your immune system. So when we're growing up, back in the day when we weren't as hygienic and we weren't so hyper, clean, our immune systems would be constantly fighting off things. They would be learning how to recognize. They'd be learning how to differentiate between the things that are harmful and the things that are harmless. And because we don't have that, because we're not able to distinguish at an early age what's harmful and what's harmless, then our bodies become hyper-reactive to things that are actually harmless. So that's the hygiene hypothesis. And then other people who have allergy, who don't have allergies, those are people who, have, interestingly, kind of like a poor hygienic environment because they are exposed to all of those things. So their immune system is very clear on what's harmful and what's not. So those people actually tend to have a protective response. Now also, of course, there's the genetic predisposition, or basically, if a family member has an allergy, then it can get passed down to generations. And there's a lot of evidence for that, mainly that in terms of statistics or in terms of numbers of people who get allergies, if you have a parent or a sibling that has allergies, and when I say allergies, I mean all types of allergies. It doesn't mean one type of allergies, and it doesn't actually even mean allergy, but it means in the allergy family. And so in the allergy family, that constitutes diseases like asthma, allergic asthma, and even eczema. So those are all type of allergic diseases. So if one family member, such as a parent or sibling, has allergies, asthma, eczema, then you're actually twice as likely to have a child, basically, or a sibling that also has one of them. And then if both of your family members or both of your parents actually have one of these disease states, then you are 50 to 80%, predisposition to having this as well. So genetics, along with some sort of environmental trigger, such as the hygiene hypothesis, that basically are the current theories of why some people get allergies and some people don't. Okay, now in terms of how common allergies are in the United States. So there's about 320 million people in the United States, right? So can anyone kind of tell me how many people they think have allergies? You can take a guess. Sorry, what? 300 million? No. That's a lot. Anyone else? 40%. 40% I have. 50%. Okay. So basically it's about 50 million adults, 50 million Americans I should say, and including obviously millions of kids. So 36 million suffer from seasonal allergies, and about the rest of that basically suffer from food allergies. So it is actually a lot. It's not as many as some of you were thinking, but it's still a lot of people suffer from this. And allergic diseases, including, like I said, asthma and eczema, actually are the 5th most common chronic disease in all ages. So when you think about chronic diseases, you're thinking about things like heart disease, diabetes, and allergies is number 5 in that list. So it's very, very common, and like I said, it affects probably, even I know some of you didn't stand up, but it probably does affect almost somebody that everybody knows. You might not even know it, they might not talk about it, but probably all of you actually know somebody that has allergies. And it's the 3rd most common chronic disease amongst children, so even more common in children. Food allergies are actually on the rise, and especially in children, it affects about 6 million or 8% of children in the United States. So in every classroom, and we consider this a classroom pretty much because this is the size of a typical class, at least in the United States, there would be about 2 kids in that class that have food allergies, right? So that's why you might hear about food allergies actually in the media a lot, because there's many instances, actually, particularly in Maryland and Virginia in the past year or so, that where children have actually died because of food allergies, because it is so common. So, if any of you have kids, this is something that you have to be aware of. If your own child doesn't have a food allergy, then about 2 other kids in their class will have allergies, and something that you have to be aware of, particularly with relation to, what foods you're bringing into the classroom, and what's allowed and what's not allowed, and peanut-free tables and things like that. Also, every 3 minutes, somebody is sent to the emergency room because of a food allergy reaction. So I've talked for now 20 minutes or so. So 27 kids have already been to the emergency room for food allergies. So that's a lot of people. Okay, so how do you diagnose allergies? This is my job, right? This is what I do every single day. So basically there's different ways to diagnose allergies. And the most, the most important part of diagnosing an allergy is actually the history. So when someone comes in the office and they say, I have no idea what I'm allergic to, that's not that helpful, actually. You have to be, and this goes back to what I said about being conscious of your bodies, you have to come in and know, maybe it could be this, maybe it could be this, maybe it could be this, or at a bare minimum, what happened? What was the reaction? You have to recall what happened, what symptoms you had, what you may have been exposed to, what you were doing at the time you were exposed, what time of day it was, who you were around, all of those things you have to kind of be mindful of to know what it is that you might actually be sensitive to. So that's actually a huge part of diagnosing the allergy is the story, what happened. And then of course the testing. So there's two major types of allergy testing, and one is on your skin and one is in the blood. So the skin test is actually, people get really scared of it, but it's actually not very scary at all. It's a very, very simple test. Basically, you take a little plastic device like this, and it has little pricks at the end of it, okay? They're not needles, they're just little plastic pricks. And basically, you dip that device into a tray of purified proteins to the things that you are looking for as potential allergens. So these could be different types of pollen, these could be different types of foods, whatever they may be, based on your history. We dip this little device in, and then we prick it on either your hand, we definitely do that for adults, your arms, and then for children we do it on their backs, just so that they don't scratch. So basically, we prick that on, we wait for 15 minutes and see if those mast cells that I talked about earlier release those mediators, and those mediators come to your skin and basically show up as a red bump, okay, right? Because if you're sensitive to those things, those mast cells are going to release all of them, they're going to come to the skin and cause a reaction, which can cause a red bump, which can cause you to be a little bit itchy, and then we can see in that little row which ones have bumps and which ones don't, or if none have bumps, etc. So that's the skin test, and it's a pretty good test for allergies, especially in the context of a good history. The other test is a blood test, and basically it's called an immunocap, or a while ago it was called a RAS test. Basically, this just looks at levels of those antibodies that I mentioned earlier, those IgE antibodies that are created and that are kind of just sitting there waiting for you to be exposed again to an allergen. So it basically looks at the level of that antibody in your system to any particular allergen. So if your doctor orders this blood work, they would order a test to say all different types of pollen, or if you say it's a food, they would test you to all different types of the common foods, and there would be a number associated with that, and that number will tell you how many antibodies, on a scale that you have to that particular allergen. So if that number is high, most likely you are sensitive to that thing, and if that number is low, most likely you're not. It's not 100%, but it's a decent test, especially for people that can't get the skin test, or we need to kind of look at both. Okay, so now we're going to talk about environmental allergies. So environmental allergies you can classify into two different categories. Seasonal, which is what a lot of people in this DMV area have, because there's a lot of foliage here, and that is related to pollen. So pollen are particles that are released by different types of plants and things like that. And that's basically tree pollen, grass pollen, weed pollen, and ragweed pollen. And those are all pollen. So when people say pollen, you actually don't even know which pollen they're talking about. Some people are allergic to grass pollen, some people are allergic to tree pollen, some people are allergic to all different types of pollen. So They're different types of pollens. And actually, all those different types of pollens come out at different times of the year. They're not all present at the same time. So for example, in this area, and it's different actually in different parts of the country. So in this area, in the DMV area, the springtime is generally when tree pollen pollinates. So this year, and it's also actually being pushed back every year, but this year it'll probably be in just a few weeks, probably in about 3 weeks, the tree pollen will probably start to come out. And actually, it even can start a little bit earlier. There's actually signs that it might be starting a little bit earlier. But generally, beginning of March to about beginning of June will be your tree pollen. And then grass pollen tends to pollinate late spring and through the summer. So that'll be somewhere around May, middle of May to August, mid-August or so. And then weed pollen and ragweed pollen generally will be in the fall, and that'll be August to basically the first frost, whenever that is. So this year it lasted for a while. And symptoms of those pollen allergy is actually, when you hear the word hay fever, that's what you're hearing about. People that are sensitive to seasonal allergies have hay fever or allergic rhinitis, which we'll talk about. And then the other type of environmental allergies are perennial, we call perennial or year-round. They're not limited to one particular season, but they're year-round. And those things that are around year-round. So dust mites, which are around all the time, mold can be around all the time, pets, if you have pets, can be around all the time. Cockroaches, if your apartment or house has cockroaches, those can be around all the time. Mice, rodents, things like that. Those are perennial or year-round allergens. And I know that it has here, this was just the graphic that I found, but smoke and odor are actually not allergens. So I know a lot of people will say I'm allergic to smoke, but it's not an allergen, it's actually what we call an irritant. So, and the difference is just is particularly related to allergens, where your mast cells released all those mediators, but with irritants, those just have a different mechanism. So you can be sensitive to those things and your body can react to those things, which actually most people do. Most people actually have some sort of reaction to smoke and different types of scents. Some people have more than others, but it's actually not an allergy per se. Okay, so I liked this little cartoon. I don't know if you can all see it, but it says, "My sneezes burst like ripe cherry tomatoes, my eyes water like a dewy red rose," and then the doctor says, "You need an allergy medicine." I really like analogies and puns, so. But I was going to ask you guys. So, many of you have seasonal allergies or know people that have them. So, what kinds of symptoms do you hear about? Do you have, or do you hear other people talk about, or do you see when letting you know that it's pollen season? Anybody?
When the pollen comes, my hand have a lot of swelling the face.
Your face swells and
water coming.
And watery eyes.
Especially when the pollen coming.
Mm-hmm. Right, and then sneezing.
I have actually strange allergy. When the winter comes, always when it's cold, I start having nose congestion.
Okay.
So I don't know if it's that allergy or something else, or I don't know.
So let's go back. Okay. So interestingly, so that happens to a lot of people too. In the winter, you can get a lot of congestion. And that can be one of two things. So it can be either a perennial allergen, and the reason that would show up is because, in the winter is when people tend to stay indoors more, so they're exposed more to the things that are indoor, like dust mites, or if they have a pet, or roaches. All of those indoor things show up actually more in the winter, because people are being exposed to those things much more. Or in the cold weather itself can actually be an irritant and actually cause congestion. So it's one or the other. You would really need an allergy test to figure out which one, but it could be either one. Okay, so sorry, any more symptoms? So we got sneezing, we got runny nose, you said congestion, facial swelling, anything else? Diarrhea, okay, we'll talk about that one. You can have diarrhea, but it's not usually a sign of a seasonal or perennial allergy, not usually. I would say probably not ever, but it can be a symptom of something else, which we'll talk about later. Okay, so it's a little small here, but basically I put this picture up here because when you think of someone who has really bad allergies, he's kind of the definition of what you think of. So usually these people will have a tissue in their hand all the time, right? They're not leaving their house without tissues in their hands, and usually they're blowing their nose. They look pretty miserable during, at least pollen season if they have seasonal allergies, or indoors if they have indoor or perennial allergies. And I also put this little graphic on the side because one of the common questions, and I'm going to intersperse like common questions that I hear in the presentation. And so one of the common questions that I always get asked is, what's the difference, or how can you tell the difference between allergies, and how can you tell the difference between a cold or a flu type virus? On the left hand side is a lot of the things that you all mentioned. So itchy ears, nose, and throat are things that you haven't mentioned, but really runny nose, nasal congestion, red watery eyes, and even some people lose energy. They're very tired and fatigued, they want to stay in bed. And actually, interestingly, those middle symptoms, the runny nose, nasal congestion, and the watery eyes, and the loss of energy, that actually can occur in both, if you have an allergy or if you have a cold. The things that differentiate an allergy from a cold are actually clear mucus sometimes. Okay, you can also have a virus and also have clear mucus, so the color of the mucus isn't totally telling you that it's one or the other, but if it's clear for the duration of the whole thing, then it's likely allergies, and if at some point it changes, that could also tell you that it's an infection. Seasonal symptoms, obviously, tells you that it's more likely to be seasonal. Symptoms that last for more than 10 days, so if they're lasting for the whole season, it's probably allergies. If it's lasting for 7 to 10 days, then it's probably mostly a virus, because most viruses kind of, resolve by 7 to 10 days. Itching is actually like a hallmark. So you don't usually get itching with a cold or a virus. You usually get itching of your eyes or your nose, or even your throat because of allergies, because of those mast cells and because of that histamine. Also symptoms year-round, of course, if you have your year-round allergen. And then sneezing, because that's related to itching, right? Itching of your nose. And then cold and flu, those are obviously symptoms of an infection. Those are either a bacterial infection or a viral infection. And generally, that'll present as a fever, sore throat. Your symptoms in the beginning are really bad as opposed to kind of building up. You can have a thick discharge. You can have a hacking cough, although you can have a hacking cough with allergy too. You can get muscle aches and pains, and you can get chills. It's more kind of like what we call a systemic symptoms, right? Your whole body's affected as opposed to just one part of your body, generally your face and your nose and your eyes and your ears. Okay, because that was in the flyer about sinuses, I thought I'd just mention something about sinuses, because some people will come to see me and they'll say, I have sinuses. That's what they'll say, I have sinuses, and I always say, everybody has sinuses, but what they mean is, I have sinus problems or a sinus infection. So I thought it would be helpful to kind of tell you what sinuses are, right? Because then you won't say I have sinuses when you go to the doctor, because everyone has sinuses. So sinuses are basically these air-filled sacs in your face. So we have actually 4 different types of sinuses in our face. So we have frontal sinuses, which is basically your forehead. We have ethmoid sinuses, which are basically right around your nose, on both sides of your nose. We have maxillary sinuses, which are basically kind of like in your upper cheeks. And then we have sphenoid sinuses, which are kind of further back. Most people tend to feel pain or pressure in their face, either in the frontal sinuses, maxillary sinuses, or in the ethmoid sinuses here. Not as much as in the sphenoid sinuses. But basically, the job of the sinuses are to lighten the bones of the skull, because otherwise if there weren't air-filled sacs, right, we'd have a hard time keeping our heads up. It would be really heavy. So there's air-filled sacs for that reason. And then also they're lined with mucus. And so that mucus actually clears out foreign substances, and also it makes the air that we breathe moist. So when we breathe in air, it's usually very dry, and this serves to kind of moisten it up, which actually helps us breathe better. Okay, so actually, let me go back here. So just to make this a little more interactive again, so when we think about, what do we do when we have these symptoms, right? Okay, let's start with the seasonal allergies. Those of you that have seasonal allergies, what do you do to avoid the pollen? Is there anything that you do differently when the pollen season comes out to try to avoid it?
You should close the door and the window, don't open the window.
What do you do with the windows?
The window, sometimes people open the window, the pollen can come and
So you close the windows. Yeah, you close the windows, right? Right, because the pollen is all in the air, it's airborne. So you close the windows. Anything else? Wear a mask when you go out. That's a good idea. Yeah? Anything else?
To change the clothes inside the house versus out.
Yeah.
The clothes.
Yeah, when you come, if you've been spending time outside and the pollen all gets stuck to your clothes, so when you come inside, you change those clothes, and then you mentioned taking a shower so that your hair and your skin that also probably have pollen on them gets washed away, right? Anything else? It's a lot of things that you can do. Yeah, we'll get to that. Okay. So good, you guys got a lot. So basically, I wrote a whole bunch here. So basically, the first one, keeping the doors, not just the doors, the windows and the doors closed, not just in your house, but also in your car. A lot of people like that fresh air, but that fresh air has all the pollen. So you want to just use air conditioning during the seasons that you have sensitivity to pollen, okay? Keep everything closed. We don't do this that often, but people like to sometimes dry their clothes outside on like a clothesline or on their deck or whatever, right? That's a big no-no because all that pollen in the air is now getting stuck to your clothes, which you're going to put on and keep on for the whole day. So during those pollen seasons, you want to make sure that you don't do that. If you're going to keep them out, then in your house, or just use the dryer. You need to go to work or you need to do errands. Yes, go outside, cover your face, go into your car, close the windows, and that's fine. But, if you can avoid it, then avoid those hours.
They mentioned it in the news every day, the pollen count, peak hours, every day.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, most of the local weather channels, because it's different in every city, they will mention what the pollen count is for that area that day. And if they have different colors even to describe, how high the pollen count is. Or if you don't watch TV, then online, you can even go to, there's so many different websites. The most easiest one to remember is pollen.com. There's apps for it, but there's also just a website. You just go in there, type your zip code, and it'll tell you what the pollen count is. So if you have bad allergies, then you check the pollen count. If it's high, you stay indoors, or keep your kid indoors for at least that part of the day. So stay indoor on dry, windy days because, like I said, the pollen is airborne, and when there's a lot of wind, the pollen is traveling a lot, so you don't want to be outdoors then. Using an air purifier. So an air purifier is something that filters the air in your room. So no matter how hard you try, you're still going to have some pollen in your house. These are all the things that we mentioned. Those are things that, are minimizing, but to minimize even more what you brought in because of your clothes or you brought in just because you opened the door for a minute or two. Air filters, air purifiers can actually suck those out or filter those through. And the only one that's actually been proven to actually filter your air for allergens is what we call a HEPA air purifier. So they have all sorts of air purifiers in the stores and in the market. They have things called ionic air filters. They have all of these things. None of those have actually been proven to get rid of allergens. Only HEPA air purifiers have. So those are the letters that you want to look for if you're going to get an air purifier. So avoid mowing the lawn or raking leaves. Someone else should do that in your house that's not sensitive to allergens. Particularly, obviously in the fall, because when you're raking those leaves, all that pollen is going to now get in the air. And especially if you're allergic to mold, actually, all that soil that you're going to now be raking up is now all those particles are going to be getting into you're going to be inhaling those. So you want to either wear a mask if you're the only one that can do this job. hire someone else to do it, or get another family member who's not as sensitive to do that for you. Wear an outdoor mask, someone mentioned that when you're gardening or going from your house to your car. And then change clothes when you come home and shower before bed, not in the morning, so that you're not sleeping with all the pollen as an unwanted guest, right? Okay, so that was for seasonal. So in terms of perennial, or those year-round or indoor allergens, there's actually a lot of things that you can do to avoid or minimize your exposure to those as well. So dust mites is actually a really, really common allergen. Dust mites are actually these little critters. If you saw them, which I don't know if you saw the previous picture, but they look like, almost like ticks, but they're microscopic. So you can't see them, you'll never see them, but you just know they're there. They're like those insidious things that are everywhere. So every time you see dust, or if you know there's dust, there's actually these little mites in there. And those mites are actually what cause the allergen. You can inhale those mites. So you want to minimize your exposure to those dust mites. And the ways to do that are many. I just listed a few here. But basically, dust mites like to be in areas that they can sink into, and also areas that have high humidity. So areas that they can sink into are things like your pillow, right? There's a lot of fabric there, your couch, your mattress, your box spring, corners of your house, things like that. Areas that no one's gonna go, you know? But what you can do about these things is get special allergy encasements for dust mites. So these encasements have a zipper, and the fabric in them is basically so tightly woven, so the dust mites can't sit in there. They can't kind of wedge themselves into all that fabric because they're very, very tightly woven. So you would think this would be like vinyl or something like that, right? And actually, several years ago, those dust mite covers actually were more like vinyl, and they were really annoying. So if you were sleeping on them, you would hear this crinkly sound. But we've advanced a lot since then, and now the covers are actually really nice. You almost wouldn't even be able to tell the difference between a dust mite proof cover and actually just regular sheets. So they're, you know, they can be costly, but they are well worth it because the dust mites are not going to be settling in there. So getting those covers is really important. Washing your sheets and blanket in hot water, because hot water actually kills the dust mites. So you want to do that weekly. Most people do it weekly anyway, but some people maybe might do it once every 2 weeks or so, and you really want to do it weekly to get rid of you know, anything that's still there. Using a dehumidifier or air conditioner, because dust mites do like humidity. So using a dehumidifier to get rid of the humidity is important. And then either if you have a lot of carpeting, obviously again, dust mites will like staying in that carpet. So either removing the carpet or at least vacuuming it 1 to 2 times a week. Okay, pets, I know, you know, that's not a huge, most Muslims don't have pets generally, but some people do, and different types of pets. And so, you know, if you do have a pet and you happen to be allergic to your cat, your dog, your hamster, your gerbil, whatever it may be, your bird, you know, especially the ones that have dander. So people always ask, like, what is it about the pet that you can be allergic to? And it's the dander. So it's not the hair, it's the dander, which is basically like the equivalent of dandruff that we would have, right? So it's like the flakes from your skin. So every animal has flakes from their skin. So keeping the pet out of the bedroom is important because you spend most of your time in the bedroom. So keeping it outside, if you can't get rid of it altogether, or getting rid of it altogether and just finding it another home. And then if it is an animal that you can bathe, then bathing it weekly to get rid of all of that dandruff or dander. In terms of mold, a lot of people are either allergic to mold or at least sensitive to mold, okay? So mold likes areas of humidity also. So if you see mold, basically, and those areas would be your bathroom or your kitchen area where there's a faucet or a sink, you want to clean them regularly to make sure that mold doesn't build up. If you need a dehumidifier, use a dehumidifier. Mold can also be found in soil. So if you have houseplants, that's not a good thing if you have mold allergies. So get rid of your houseplants. And then obviously cleaning the mold, you can remove it with 50% bleach. Lysol can also get rid of it. There's ammonia can also get rid of it. There's a whole bunch of things that you can use. And then if you like gardening or raking, like I said, you don't want to perturb that soil. So either avoid it or wear a mask if you need to. And then lastly, roaches, which actually, believe it or not, happen to be a very common allergen, especially in urban areas, because roaches are everywhere, even if you don't see them. They are in all old office buildings, old schools. You might not see them in this masjid, but I bet they're here somewhere. And obviously in very urban apartments and things like that as well. I actually don't have allergies myself, but interestingly, well, I should say I don't have most allergies, but the one allergy I actually have is to cockroaches, which is interesting. And it's probably because I lived in New York City and there was cockroaches, and who knows, I got sensitive to them somehow. So things that you can do are obviously, washing your dishes regularly, because cockroaches like moisture and they like food. So washing the dishes, putting them away, taking out the garbage every single day so that, there's no food or moisture around. Sweeping food crumbs, cleaning things, and these are things that we should be doing anyway, right? But we have to be extra vigilant. Fixing leaking faucets and pipes immediately, and then blocking like little cracks or crevices where they can enter from outside. Okay, so someone mentioned medicine. So yeah, so of course the major thing is to avoid them first, but then if you're still having symptoms, which is most people that I see, then we have to go to drugs, right? Our favorite. So first thing is, if a lot of people don't actually like using medicine, so there's other things that you can do that are not actual medicine that will help. One being what you commonly may hear referred to as like the neti pot, or what basically, that's just one particular type of saline rinse. And the saline rinse, what they do is they actually just like flush out your nose and your sinuses, so all that buildup can just get out of there. So they come in different forms. There's like a little squeegee bottle type. There's one that actually looks like a pot. There's one that's has a battery operated, that's like has a lot of pressure that you can force up there. But the general concept is that you take saline, which is salt water, which is what our bodies are essentially made, 2/3 of our bodies are made up of anyway, and all you're doing is flushing it out. So there's different techniques for doing it that build up so that you don't, so that doesn't stay there and cause either congestion or pressure or develop into a sinus infection, etc. And that actually, believe it or not, helps a lot of people. There are a lot of people that actually can just do that and not use any medication, and they feel a lot better, especially people that don't want to take medications. This is like a lifesaver for them. And then of course, a lot of people are interested in like holistic or homeopathic treatment. So they don't want to use pharmacologics, but they want to use natural substances. And actually there are quite a number of natural substances that will help people who have allergies. So things that have been proven to have either anti-inflammatory, so that's decreasing the inflammation in your body, which happens with allergies, or antihistamine properties, histamine being that mediator that I talked about, which causes all the allergy symptoms. So antihistamine properties are things like ginger, garlic, nettle leaf actually, honey actually, well, I'll talk about honey in a second. Peppermint can actually be a good decongestant. All of those things are things that you can do to reduce your symptoms. Honey is an interesting one. Obviously, we know, that Islamically, we know that, the Prophet ﷺ would always talk about the medicinal properties of honey. Now, it's a little bit controversial in the field of allergy, mostly because all the evidence is what we call anecdotal, or people talk about how much it helps them with their allergies, but in terms of objective scientific studies, it actually has not been proven to help people. And actually, what you usually will hear about is local honey, and the thought is, so theoretically it makes sense, theoretically local honey has all your local pollen, so if you live in a particular environment, the pollen that you're going to be exposed to, some of that will probably be in the honey, in the local honey, and if you take some of that local honey in low doses over a long period of time, maybe, just maybe, your body might become tolerant of that pollen because you're exposing yourself to it. The risk is that if you're allergic to that pollen and now you are forcibly introducing that into your system, you can actually have a really bad reaction. And because honey is not, the pollen in honey is not quantified, you can have a batch of honey that has a lot of the pollen that you're allergic to. You may have some batches that don't have any of the pollen that you're allergic to, in which case it's not going to help that. And then you have a part that, maybe one part that has a lot, and then you may have a really bad reaction. So honey is one of those things that's a little bit controversial. In terms of medicine, so there's different types of medicine, and the top row are medicines that, these are nasal sprays that are really helpful. Like when you go to the physician and ask for allergy medication, most likely, especially with nasal symptoms, most likely they will give you a nose spray. And these are nasal steroid sprays or nasal antihistamine sprays. And then of course these are your antihistamine tablets or liquids, Benadryl, which can make you really groggy, or these other they're all over the counter now, the ones here. There's some that are prescription, which are good too, but these are the over the counter ones. I put a big X through these because Afrin is a nose spray that you can use, but it actually can cause a rebound effect if you use it for more than 3 days. So it's not one that you want to be using regularly. And then Sudafed is okay for short-term use also, but it can also cause problems like high blood pressure and things like that. So you don't want to use it if you have high blood pressure, and you don't want to use it for a long period of time. Lastly, in terms of getting rid of your allergies, right? So all these medicines, they'll help in the moment, but there's actually ways that you can actually potentially get rid of your allergies altogether. And what we call this is desensitization, and there's 2 ways to do it. And desensitization is basically where you're exposing your body to the thing that you're allergic to in small quantities, so your body becomes used to it, like the case of what was thought of with honey. And the 2 ways to do this is, one is with injections, so you come in for shots. So we figure out what you're allergic to, we come up with a vial for you of all the things that you're allergic to, and you get little doses of this, and every week we increase it, the amount that you're getting, so after a while, your body's like, I'm not allergic to this thing. This thing has been in my body regularly, and it clearly is not harming me, so you just lose your allergenicity. That whole process takes about 3 to 5 years, so it's actually a commitment. But in the end, the payoffs are really, really good because more than 85% of people can either get rid of their symptoms or get rid of allergies altogether. And then just in the past 1.5 to 2 years, an allergy tablet came out, which works in the same way, where you have to take it every single day, not weekly or monthly. You have to take it every day, and the only 2 tablets that came out are grass and ragweed. So it's only useful for those 2 things. Okay, I'm going to quickly go into a little bit about food allergies, just because I know that people are interested in this. But food allergies work in the same way as all the other allergies. There's no different mechanism for them, work in the same way. The most common allergens, there's 8. We call them the top 8. And basically, these are the common ones that you're about. So milk, soy, egg, wheat, peanut, tree nuts, fish, and shellfish. Those are 8. As kids, you hear about milk, egg, peanuts, wheat, and soy, and actually you can outgrow all of those except for the nuts, usually by age 5 or so, kids can outgrow those. And then for adults, you usually hear more about the nuts and more about the fish and the shellfish. So your symptoms, the only difference between food allergies and environmental allergies generally are the symptoms. So symptoms of environmental, obviously you get more in the respiratory tract, but symptoms of food allergies, you're ingesting these things, so you get them all everywhere. So, and they can range from mild to severe. This is a picture of a kid who obviously has a really bad reaction. I don't know if you can see, but he has a bad rash, he has swelling of his lips, he's not a good situation. The mild ones, you can just maybe have some itching in your throat, itching of your tongue, maybe a rash around your mouth or something, but it actually can be pretty severe and life-threatening. Environmental allergies generally are not life-threatening. They're just, your quality of life just goes down. But food allergies can actually be life-threatening, as I mentioned in the case of the children in schools in Maryland and Virginia who actually died because of food allergies. And 40 to 50% of people actually are at high risk of having anaphylaxis to food allergies. And you have a higher risk if you have other, asthma or some other respiratory illness. I don't know why this didn't come out completely, but basically the symptoms of anaphylaxis, those are life-threatening symptoms. So basically if you feel like your throat is closing, if you feel like you can't breathe, if you're vomiting uncontrollably, if you feel faint, you pass out, you can actually even die because your body can shut down as a result of your body going into hyperdrive, trying to get rid of that thing that you're allergic to. It's reacting, all your mast cells are releasing all those mediators, and it can be very very bad. So if you do have a food allergy, what does that mean? It actually means it really impacts your life in a big way. What you have to do is you have to strictly avoid the food that you're allergic to. You have to be very vigilant, reading labels all the time, for yourself or for your kids, whoever has the allergy. Because you have to know that even one bite can actually not just hurt, but one taste of it can actually kill somebody, potentially. So, and you have to carry what we call an epinephrine injector at all times, which is a life-saving medication. So there's 2 different brands. There used to be another one, but it just got taken off the market. It's AutoQ. But basically, the point of this is don't delay using this medication if you have any of those symptoms, because the risk is much, much greater than the benefit of using it. There's very little harm in using this medication, but you can actually save your life or someone else's life if you use it. And you always want to keep 2 on hand. It comes in a package of 2. You don't want to separate them. You want to keep them together because you actually want to, you might have to use one after the other if somebody's not getting better. Food avoidance, just reading labels. You want to, I said peanuts won't jump out and get you, meaning like they're not just there. Like you can avoid these things. You can make sure that there is no peanut butter around you or your child or whatever. And then obviously making sure the school knows if it's a child in question, etc. This one I think is important because someone mentioned diarrhea, and people always ask me about food allergies versus food intolerances. So the difference between a food allergy and an intolerance is that food allergies affect your immune system, and food intolerances don't. They just affect your GI system or your gut. So food intolerances will generally show up as you feeling like your belly hurts, or you're bloating, or you're nauseous, or you're vomiting, or you have diarrhea. And it just means generally that your body cannot digest that food for whatever reason. The most common one that we hear about is lactose intolerance. Okay, but celiac disease is also a type of intolerance. It's not an allergy. Generally, the type of test that we use for allergies will not diagnose them. This one's interesting, oral allergy syndrome. I also get a lot of questions about this. People during pollen seasons will actually, when they eat certain types of fruits, they just get itchy. I don't know why. And the reason is because the pollen, the protein in the pollen and the protein in certain types of fruits cross-react. They look like each other to your body. And so your body kind of develops a reaction, but it's generally not going to be life-threatening. And if you cook the food, the protein actually changes and it doesn't look like the pollen anymore, so you're generally good if you do that. And this is just a list of, like, if you have this type of pollen allergy, you might be sensitive to these fruits, etc. This is just a list of resources that you can go to. This is a national allergy organization that has a lot of resources, the Food Allergy Anaphylaxis Network. All of these are really good resources. And then the Dust Mite covers, this is actually the best website to get allergy covers for if you need them. And then last but not least, I thought this was a really funny cartoon. It says, "Mom took me to the doctor today. He says I have nut allergies." He says, "Well, I guess you can never work in Congress." I thought that was funny, particularly because you can't work on Trump's campaign. And this is my office. I actually have an office in Rockville. I also have one in Waldorf, but related to you guys, this is probably the closest one. You can always call if you have questions, or come by, make an appointment, whatever you want to. But that's it. If you have any questions, let me know.
All right.
Thank you, Naba.